Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous podcast with your host, Bruce Hutcheon. This is episode number 117.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutcheon.
In today's episodes, we have Brad Jones. His passion is whitetails. He's a member of Scrape Line Hunters Pro Staff. He has spent many hours making management and habitats improvement to his properties and others. By making changes to these properties, deer want to live there, where before they just pass through. Along the way, I've learned where to place food plots and what food plots draw deer in to make them happy. I've also learned that proper tree stand placement, along with good scent control, will help me when pursuing mature bucks. I find this rewarding because it puts all my skills together. By locating a mature buck, follow his movements from spring to fall, and putting everything together to harvest him. Now I like to share what I've learned with other hunters so they can too have the same passion as I do.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, Bruce Hutcheon, and today we're heading to Wisconsin, and we're not going to talk about the Packers, folks. We're going to chat with Brad Jones from the Madison area and the owner of Scrape Line Hunters. Hey, Brad, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bruce, thanks for having me.
Hey, let's just start it right off. Let's talk about the mission and the vision and why you started Scrape Line Hunters.
I started Scrape Line Hunters along with my brother Mike because we had both obtained some land and we wanted to set it up for deer hunting. We had struggled like everybody else, when you first get into deer hunting, not really realizing how we could attract deer and hold deer in our property. So we set up a website, and it kind of follows what we did to make improvements, like putting in food plots, habitat improvements, where to place your tree stand or ground line, how to use trail cameras effective, and scent control. That was another big thing that we did.
So when a person goes to your website, what do they see?
Bruce, they're going to find everything that we've done on the property to be able to shoot mature bucks. We have a section that's all on food plots, and then we have another section, our blogs, which talk about daily and weekly improvements that we've made on the property.
And do you have video? Is it video and narratives?
Yes, we've got a YouTube page that we show things like frost seeding, how to put in food plots, how to use trail cams effectively, how to put up your tree stand in pitch points, and how to screen in your hunting land so people can't see into it. And you can use screening to get to your tree stand without the deer seeing you.
Pinch points. Talk to me about pinch points. What does that mean to you?
Pinch points to me is a narrowing of a property where the deer are going to travel across. You're like a large field, okay? When a deer comes into a large field, he can go anywhere he wants to. We want to find an area within that field that moves the deer, funnels them down to a certain area. And that's where we'll place our stand. If we have a large field where we don't have a natural pinch point, we can make one. We can put in different types of screening to force those deer down to that little pinch point.
Now if you were a trapper, trappers actually alter the pathway of what they're trying to trap. And they do that by putting brush and sticks, and there's all sorts of secrets. So is that what you're doing with your, I'm not going to say you're hurting deer, but you're changing their behavior? Would that be a fair statement?
That's exactly what we're doing. We're bringing the deer to us, to our tree stand, to where we're going to hunt. And we can funnel them down. Like I said, we can put in screening, Egyptian wheat, sorghum, corn, hinge cutting trees down, and it just naturally funnels them right to our stand or where we want them to go.
Listeners, I want you to take some notes on what Brad just said, because you can modify the deer's travel routes. You can help them move closer to your stand or scent line or however you're set up there. But that's an important, very important fact that some people overlook. They say, oh, this looks like a great place. Up goes my tree stand, and then the deer are 50, 60 yards away. Well, if they're coming that close, Brad, how would you, I'm sitting in my stand, and they're traveling about 50 yards away. How would you change that deer's behavior?
Well, if I'm hunting like a transition area in the woods, I can hinge cut trees. And what that is you're taking a chainsaw about chest high and cutting 3/4 of the way through the tree and letting the tree naturally tip over. And that'll build a screening area, because that tree's still going to grow and it's going to produce leaves, and then you can just stop the deer from going to that area. Or you can use Egyptian wheat, like I said, if you're out in the field, or corn or sorghum, and just put it really thick so that, deer are lazy like us. They don't want to walk through some thick stuff if they don't have to. So if you make a hard edge and then buffer it for them a little bit, they're going to walk along that edge. This is really a good idea for the guy that goes out and can't find a good tree to put a tree stand. How many times, Bruce, have you been out and you can't find a straight tree to put your tree stand in? This works perfect for that.
And so, going back to what I said, so you look at your land and say, okay, he's traveling that way, so you just alter you were saying hinge cuts or of trees. Explain that to people. How do you do that?
Well, if I have a trail that a deer is traveling on and I can't set up on him, I'll hinge cut trees, cutting them with a chainsaw 3/4 of the way through and falling them over that trail. And it'll block the trail and the deer can't go through. So then I'll move the trail closer to where I want them to go. So I'll direct the deer to my tree stand, or to come out in the food plot where I want them to. I'll cut down several trees in a row, hinge cutting them, so it just creates a very thick area that deer is just not going to walk through.
What other tricks do you do religiously to help make the land, one, more favorable for deer, and two, make it more huntable for you and your brother?
Food plots play a really big role in the success that we have, and placing them in the right areas off of a bedding area. And let's say you have an acre food plot, break that thing down. Put screening all the way around the edge. Maybe make a checkerboard effect with that screening, so when those bucks come in, they just don't look at the edge of the food plot and say, no, there's no does today, I'm back in the woods. By making that checkerboard effect inside them, that buck is going to go from section to section to section. So you're slowing them down and, making them spend more time in your property.
So let's talk about, you get 100 acres. What type of relationships do you have with your surrounding neighbors?
I try to have a real good relationship with them. Talk to them frequently to see what deer they're seeing, what their plans are, what type of deer they plan on shooting. Try to talk them into, doing some quality deer management, where everybody will shoot that, 4-year-old buck instead of shooting the little bucks.
And how many neighbors do you have?
Let's see, we have 4 neighbors on the one property and 2 neighbors on the other property that we hunt.
You mentioned quality deer management. Are you ascribing to that? Do you have the local or the regional rep come and take a look at your property, or how are you involved with quality deer management?
We have not had anybody from QDMA out to our property, but we take some of their practices along with other hunting organizations and kind of put them all together and just come up with a good strategy, to grow big deer. That's everybody's objective. If you want to shoot some deer, shoot some does and let the big guys grow.
Yeah, and everybody likes to do that. Talk to me about your hit list.
My hit list. I'm a trail cam fanatic. I have my trail cams out 365 days a year, and I like to have them out in the spring right away so I can see how the deer came off from winter, see how many survived. And then as the does start dropping, we'll put together our hit list. The bucks will start to velvet out, and we'll follow them around. And on my computer, I'll make up a folder for each buck and follow him year per year and see how he grows. That's basically it for putting together my hit list.
And which age class are you targeting?
I want a 4+ year old deer. A couple of the deer that I'm following right now are 6 to 7 years old. And I'm going to tell you what, as they get older, they get a lot smarter.
And just like you and I are supposed to, as we age, we're supposed to get a lot smarter, but sometimes that doesn't work out. In my case, so well.
Mine too.
So now, Wisconsin in some areas has a liberal doe season, or you can get extra tags. I know up where we hunt along the Baraboo River, they had some disease up there, and they gave, CWD, and they gave away a lot of extra tags. Do you harvest does on your property?
Yes, we do. We, depending on what our trail cameras are showing us, we'll definitely try to knock down some does to get that buck doe back in check. Now, in Wisconsin, they've changed some of the laws here now. Used to be able to, for every doe you shot, you could shoot a buck in the CWD area. Well, they've went away from that, thank God, because they were starting to overharvest the bucks. And I think in the next 5 years, once again, we're going to see some really nice bucks come out of the state of Wisconsin.
Well, I know I have had the opportunity of hunting Buffalo County, and Buffalo County ranks right up with Pike County as top Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett. Why do you think Buffalo County has so much leadership? I guess I'm just trying to pick out a word here. Why do they produce big bucks? I guess that's the easiest way to say it.
I think to start, they have great genetics up there, and I think they must have good minerals in the soil, so the crops that they grow, the deer get the full potential out of those crops. But it all starts with good genetics, too. If you don't have the genetics, you can't grow big bucks.
And that's, everybody would echo that. So when you're looking at your deer and the property that you're managing and building, what do you think the top end is going to be? You got some 6 and 7 year old deer you're watching. So where do you think score-wise those bucks are going to be?
The 7-year-old buck that I'm following is only an 8-pointer, and he's always been an 8-pointer. So, if he scores 150 inches, that'll be tops for him. But, boy, he's got some mass, and he's a huge-bodied deer, and he's really smart. I'm hunting a 4-year-old buck that is a 10-pointer, and he'll probably push 160. So I would say our maximum potential on the land that I'm hunting is probably high 160s to low 170s, which is a darn nice deer. Very nice.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with those deer any place. You get over 150, and that's kind of the benchmark I look at. 150 and above, because I'm older, I've shot a lot of deer, and I like spending time in the woods. So if Mr. Wonderful comes by, 150 class, 8-pointer or 10-pointer or better, or a deer with character. Let's talk about deer with characters, because I'm sure you've seen some. What's so special about those deer that just has some awesome character to them?
Oh, I have a lot of that genetic on the property that I'm hunting. The best buck I've shot, I called the G2 buck, and he split on both G2s, and then he split on the left-hand side on his G3, and just a super unique buck. And I don't know, everybody's just drawn to those type of deer for some reason, because they're different than your typical deer.
Yeah, and I would certainly, echo that, because there's something about, and you meant split G1s or G2s or drop tines, they get your attention because you just, we all look at the magazines, we all look at the TV and the shows and the symmetry of some of the bucks. You go, oh wow, but then you throw one with drop tines and one side just a mangled mess of bone, and the other side's perfect, and you go, wow, what a deer, bang.
Yeah.
or released, or whatever weapon you're using. And I think that's interesting myself. And I'd sure like our listeners, you can go to my website at whitetailrendezvous.com and post a comment about deer with character. And I'm going to write a blog on that. I'm making a note right now because I think that's just interesting. When we have an opportunity to harvest a deer that's unique. I guess that's the best word.
Absolutely. That brings up an aha moment for me. I hunted this G2 buck for 3 years, and I had a few encounters with him, but I had the encounters during the peak of the rut, and he was always locked down with a doe. And so 3 years ago, during the gun hunting season, I didn't see him the first 2 days, and then I had to come back to town, and I got back up to the hunting land on the third day, the fourth day, and I checked 2 trail cameras, and the first one I checked, the G2 buck was feeding in a brassica plot 2 nights in a row, and I'm like, oh God, I missed this thing. Well, we had a big front come in, and I thought to myself, I said, front's coming in, I bet you he's coming back tonight. And sure enough, I sat a transition between where I thought his bedding area was and that food plot, and I harvested that deer. Very rewarding because I had so much history with that deer and spent so much time following him around, from spring to fall. Just a complete rewarding moment. And the aha moment of it was, don't give up if you're going to choose one deer. I think a lot of guys will do that. They'll put their hit list together and say, I'm going to target this buck, I'm going to target this buck. And it's hard, and, that's how they got old. So just stick with it, and if you do harvest it, you're going to be very rewarded with all the efforts you put into it.
Listeners, you got to be committed. You got to be dedicated, and you got to put in the time, and you got to hunt smart, because a mature, anything over 4.5 years old, one, knows you're there, knows it's being hunted, and you have to beat his eyes, his ears, and his nose. Tough way to do it, and good luck to you this fall on that big 8-pointer, Brad.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to harvest him. I have so much history with him. He's my target buck. So,
well, that's awesome. Now, let's go back to your neighbors. Does he stay on your land? Do you have a sanctuary where he feels comfortable? Let's talk about how you and your brother hunt it, so you're going to have an opportunity to harvest that deer.
Absolutely, yeah. On both of our properties, we have sanctuaries, buck bedding areas, and most of those areas we've created ourselves. And believe it or not, the one buck bed that we put on Mike's property, we built that. What we did was we put logs behind, facing north so that deer can butt up to it. Then we hinge cut some trees over top of it. And the second night after we built that, we had one of his hit list bucks laying in that bed, and we have it on trail cam video. I mean, it's just amazing. So we were a true believer in building those buck beds after that. And those areas now that we put them in, the only times we go in there is spring of the year to look for sheds. And then maybe early summer, we'll put a trail camera in there if we can sneak into the area without, busting the deer out. They're a little easier when they have velvet on to, you can shake them up a little bit, but you don't want to pressure them too hard.
You're committed to 365 hunting and trail cameras. Now, let's talk about and share with the listeners what advantage that gives you once the hunting season begins?
Well, it tells me what deer are using our property. And when I put my trail cameras out, I have limits to myself what I can and can't do. So I'll start the trail cameras out in the spring. I'll put them on food plots, and I'll leave them on food plots till we move into that pre-rut when they're starting to make ground scrapes, and we'll move them to ground scrapes. And that's how I put my hit list together. You know, I'll follow that buck around the food plots, maybe moving the cameras around the food plots to get a better angle to see where he's coming from and kind of pinpoint him down into a bedding area. But like I said, I only use the food plots and the wood edge. I don't like to go into the woods. You know, I will into that bedding area early in the year, but after that I'm out of the woods and I just stay to the edges because I don't want my scent and going into the woods. And early in the season, those bucks will bed closer to food and they'll be on those just wood edges, and I don't want to bump them out too bad. So that's how I put my hit list together, by just taking most of the pictures from the food plots themselves.
Okay, I'm making a note. That's why I go silent here, and I'll edit that out. I'll edit out the silent thing. Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, what you just said is you got all these cameras, and they're taking pictures of deer coming in north, south, east, west, wherever they come in the food plot. Then you're strategizing where the buck is going to come in during hunting season, because we both understand once October hits and the first frost and everything, their patterns change because the food sources change. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I can tell you the season opens here around the third week in September. You can have a buck which you think you have them patterned up to that 13th, and for some reason something snaps and their pattern just changes. I don't know if it's the soybeans are starting to dry out at that point, you know, so they're switching green foods or what, but there's a huge change, at least in the area I hunt.
And so how does your tactics change because of the deer behavior changing?
I'll move to a different food source then. I'll always stay with green. The guy that has the green food source is going to win the battle. Those deer have to eat. You know, they can eat all the native browse they want, but if there's some very nutritious greens that you have in your food plots, they're going to be there eventually. So I'm following them out of their buck beds, out of their bedding area, and that's when I use the trail cameras to do that and follow them to the green.
What about transition zones? I've heard, seen, and read about how bucks, they'll set up 10, 15, just depends on what the edge is like and how thick it is. The thicker, you know, to the field, the edges, the closer they'll come in. But some will set up over 100 yards away. I know one stand I have, it's approximately 100 yards away from the field, but it's a natural funnel where deer just come through and then they spread out going in the field depending on the wind and everything else. So let's talk about transition zones. Do you set up in transition zones yourself?
I will, yeah, just inside the woods. But what I try to do to most of my food plots or the wood edge, we try to soften them gradually up by we use a lot of high bush cranberry, and we'll sporadically plant those around the field edges, trying to make it a real secure area for those bucks to come out. But if you don't have that, chances are those bucks are going to hang up until close to dark just outside of their bedding area before they go into that food. And they may spend, 15, 20 minutes in there. They might only spend 5 minutes in there. It just all depends on how secure that they actually feel. Another good tip in that transition area, when you're hunting those deer, is to put in a water hole, because that buck's been laid up on its bed all day, and one of the first things they do is seek water before they head out into the fields. And I've seen a lot of nice bucks over water holes.
Now, are you set up on a water hole on your property?
Absolutely, yeah. Between the buck beds and the food, I'll put in water holes, and I'll set up on those.
And we're talking ground blinds or tree stands?
Both. If I can get up in the air, I like to, but if I don't have anything that I feel that's going to work, I'll brush in a ground blind, and we've taken some nice bucks out of ground blinds.
Listeners, hear this, because everybody knows you get up high, your scent dissipates a little bit different, you can move around a little bit more, but ground blinds are productive, and I'm not just talking about a pop-up. I'm talking about just sticks and brush. You make a big mound, you get inside, you cut out shooting lanes, and that's how I've done it. Now, Brad, how have you set up these ground blinds?
We use the pop-ups, but we really brush them in. Like to have them out there a few weeks beforehand, but if we're patterning a late season buck, we'll pop one up and really brush it in and hunt it right away if we have some good deer coming through. We have a video posted on our website of my brother last year, second to the last day, took a really nice mature 8-pointer that he had on trail cameras. I think he had it feeding in that field a week, and then he killed it on the 6th day.
Wow!
All out of a ground blind.
So there's more than one ways to hunt, and what I found, depending on terrain and depending on surrounding cover, you can very well get a ground blind set up. And as Brad said, he uses a pop-up, but then he brushes it in very heavily a few weeks, if not would you say a month before the season begins?
Absolutely, yeah. But you can, like I said, if you pattern a buck and you feel that you have a shot at him, if you can get it in a thicket or even a cornfield and really brush it in good, you'll have a good shot at him.
Brad, it's amazing, but we're coming up to the end of the show. You've given us some really good information. So what I'd like to do at this time is give you the mic where you can just share with the folks, with the listeners all across North America, some of the people that have supported you, some of the people that have made Scrape Line Hunters the site it is today, some of the people that made you a better hunter. So you got the mic.
Hey, Bruce, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. I think you're doing a great thing with these podcasts, getting bits of information from all different people, getting their aspects on how they hunt. But I'd like to thank Lightning Camera Arms. If you want to self-hunt, these guys make some really nice camera arms, and they've treated us well. Wildlife Research, they make Scent Killer Gold. I swear by their products. Bert Coyote, he's been a great sponsor. Remember, if it doesn't say Luminac, guys, if it doesn't, can we edit that out?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead. Just keep rolling.
Okay. And Bert Coyote, he's been a great sponsor, too. Remember, if it doesn't say Bert Coyote, it's not a Luminac. And if you're looking for some permanent screening, look up Big Rock Trees. He's got a huge supply of willows and different kind of trees that you can plant to make permanent screening. At Deer Crossing Archery, the most rugged, affordable, small diameter arrow available today. And then last but not least, Grandpa Ray's Outdoors. I'm telling you what, John from Grandpa Ray's knows his stuff. He's a deer nutritionist. He knows everything about seeds. He's got some great mineral mix. Look him up. And then I'd like to thank my family for all their support, letting me do what I like to do. My girlfriend, Kathy, she lets me go out every weekend. She lets me use all my vacation to chase these whitetails down. I appreciate her letting me do that. And if you guys want to look us up on the web, look us up at www.scrapelinehunters.com. Check out our Facebook page. Look us up on Facebook as well. We post daily throughout the rut and let you know what's happening in South Central Wisconsin.
Now, do you have a Twitter site?
I do. I have a Twitter, Scrape Line Hunters. We also have a Instagram account as well, Scrape Line Hunters.
Okay, and I'm making notes here, and Instagram, same thing, and Facebook is Great Blind Hunters. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
On behalf of Whitetail Rendezvous Nation, Brad Jones, heck of a job today. Great information, great tips, and it's just been a joy to have you on the show, and I look forward to working with you this fall on Whitetail Rut Report.
Hey, thank you very much, Bruce, and I hope everybody has a safe and successful hunt this fall.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient.
If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.